Adolescents. Look, adolescents. I work with adolescents as well, so I know what you're going through. It's a critical period for mental health.
I love them.
I know, me too. I really do. I really do. And like, but what are the most prevalent mental health issues you see in young adults?
Well, especially the pandemic was not kind to
anybody,
our younger friends.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of times to be thinking, well, if we can all think back to what was it like to be in that adolescent period, us being popped out of school, being at home, not being able to see people, that would have a much more profound effect than us as adults saying, okay, well, you're not going to see your friends as much. You're going to be working from home. Well, in some ways, right? Some adults were going like,
thank
okay.
God. Yeah.
And I will also say that I had some of the adolescents that I work with who, you know, had some really rough contexts at school, or whose really bad things like social anxiety was getting in the way of them being able to get to school, that was impacting their grades. They actually went like, bring on like homeschool and letting me say, and their grades went up and all of these things. We're saying, okay, because this took away the anxiety.
They have their safe place, yeah.
But overall, when working with people in an adolescent period, their big developmental job is, who am I outside of my family?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Which means, right, kind of pushing back from mom and dad. Often parents are kind of going like, I don't know, they don't want to spend any time with us, so they're always kind of contrary about doing it, or like they seem to be so focused on their friends. It's like, well, yeah.
Yeah. They're trying to find an identity. You know?
And there is sort of this period in adolescence and sort of young adulthood of often for people kind of a bit of distancing before coming back with family, because we're saying I'm really trying to figure out, who am I in my peer group? How do I navigate relationships that aren't family relationships? And so then we popped all those people kind of out of their, you know, their clubs, their sports, hanging out with their friends, being at school. We also, for kids who have, you know, maybe less than optimal home environments, popped them out of teachers, coaches, other caring adults, which is really precarious. So we have seen rates across the pandemic and now of things like depression, mood disorders, anxiety be much, much higher.
Wow.
And, you know, we can, like, locally, there was a lot in the news about kind of our children's hospital in Ottawa seeing really, really, like, steep admission rates. And I think at one point, I mean, they are a child and adolescent facility, but they're also a general hospital. And when they looked at rates of admissions, their rates of more mental health admissions were much, much higher overall for the hospital compared to physical health. They were also finding kids coming in like more distress at more severe kind of presentations, and then sometimes with more kind of related medical stuff going on.
Oh my God, the social aspect of the pandemic was really, it was brutal. We're still seeing the results from it, which is crazy.
And I think a wild thing, especially with, you know, some people that I work with who are now kind of in that sort of like kind of end of high school and or just starting university, where they're going like, okay, now I'm popped into this, but for, you know, 27 years, 3 years, 2 months, however long we were doing it, they went like, I didn't have any of the normal gear up to this stuff. So you think of, okay, what's your communication like around friendships, dating, sexual relationships? It's kind of like we said, we took y'all at a practice in those times when maybe like none of us knew what was going on. So to say like, okay, you're good to start entering into this now that you're 20. People go like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's always held true for, you know, if kids have had major physical or mental health concerns. Like we see this a lot with kids who've had a lot of hospitalizations as kids or as teenagers who weren't at kind of a typical school environment. They're kind of playing catch up once they're in a more recovered space as young adults. And we're saying like, hey, like from the adult side of things, especially sometimes for me, I'm going like as the adult person who you know and who's not your parent, like none of us knew what to do. If you're looking around at same age peers and saying, well, they seem to know, it's like, well, yeah, because when you were doing this really important work to recover and be alive now, they were doing things on dates that didn't work out very well and bumbling through, and we were all just like out there making asses of ourselves, and learned what to do and not to do.
Live and learn.
Yeah.
How can parents and educators like play a role in promoting positive mental health outcomes for young people?
Listen. I think too, in some ways, to talk less, ask open-ended questions, and try to be okay with hearing some things
That you don't want to hear.
that might freak you out a little bit. If you're worried about something, and you have a trusting relationship with a young person in your life, in a way that is, that's private, that's not putting them on the spot, ask about that. And a lot of times parents will say, well, I didn't want to bring it up. I didn't want to put an idea in their head. And the truth is, if asking about depression, eating disorders, even suicidal thoughts was the problem, my job would look a lot different. We have pretty frank conversations about those things.
Yeah, you have to. You can't beat around the bush because their thoughts are pretty concrete.
And I think when it comes to schools, I mean, I would say, if I had a kid who came home saying like, hey, they weighed me at school and I'm going to be doing this food log and stuff, there would very quickly be a note coming back saying like, we will not be as a household participating in this. Like, those are just things that do not need to happen. And I think really when it comes to, I don't know about you, I thinking back to kind of, even like health and kind of like health class nutrition stuff.
Yeah.
We learned like the food guide, which has been
Its flaws.
well, it has been revamped. Like,
Yeah.
right, it's no longer kind of that pyramid. And I think if we're saying, well, is the Canada Food Guide perfect as is? No, but this is actually the first iteration that didn't have kind of lobby groups and stuff in the room. So it's a lot closer to actually being like vetted by and coming from kind of more like medical and dietetic professionals.
Really? So the old version was just a bunch of lobbyists pretty much putting together a pyramid?
Apparently, there were some groups that were very angry to be left out. And it's, hey, from a business perspective, I get it. From a health perspective, deal with it.
Yeah, get with the times. Wow.
And so those kinds of things. I mean, I have a good friend who's a high school teacher in Toronto, and she and I have had a lot of mental health talks. She's a big mental health advocate for the students she works with.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, I need to talk to you about, I need to run some things by you about this body and nutrition kind of module in the biology class I'm teaching. Like, put your ED hat on. Like, what do you think about these things? Like, how can I talk about this? Because she, even in looking at that, was like, for a lot of people in the room, it might be totally benign and fine. However, if we know that, that even though we know eating disorders don't discriminate, you don't have to be a teenage girl to have one. Many, many people who do don't fit that demographic.
Yep.
We also know that that's one of the biggest kind of times when an eating disorder will emerge, and that adolescent females do comprise, a big portion of folks that we see with eating disorders. So her point of view was very much like, I don't know the health history or current kind of status of every kid in my classroom. And I want to make sure this isn't reinforcing or triggering something that's going to be problematic or damaging or dangerous to one of my kids.
You speak on the game.